It always begins the same way. A woman looks at a man not for who he is, but for who she imagines he might become. In her eyes glimmers a faint spark, perhaps hope, perhaps hunger. The man believes he is being seen, but he is not. He is being measured, evaluated, and scanned like a blank canvas awaiting her imagined masterpiece. But the masterpiece is not him. It never was. Carl Jung warned of this, not with the placid tone of a motivational speaker, but with the razor-sharp precision of a man who spent his life plumbing the depths of the human psyche. His life's work revolved around what he termed the unconscious, that vast, silent terrain beneath awareness. In its depths, Jung uncovered a disturbing truth about love, especially romantic projection. He found that women do not simply fall for men. They fall for the idea of men, the fantasy, the illusion they construct in their own minds. Most of them don't even realize they're doing it. The man thinks he is being chosen, but he is merely cast into a role, an idealized figure who exists only within her internal cinema. And when he no longer fits the role, she swaps the actor, never the script. Jung named this projection the Animus, the unconscious masculine image that lives within every woman. When this animus is immature or unbalanced, it becomes a tyrant. It drives women to pursue dangerous men, reject genuine ones, argue without cause, dominate without wisdom, and moralize without accountability. He likened this state to a spiritual possession, where a woman becomes a mouthpiece for an unconscious force. She no longer acts from conscious volition, but from the grip of a shadowed internal ideal. And men fall into this trap because they've never been taught to see it. They confuse being wanted with being known, being chosen with being understood. They believe her when she says, "You're different," never realizing they're merely the latest in a long line of faces, cast to perform in a fantasy that predates them. When the fantasy crumbles, when the illusion collapses, the man is left bewildered, betrayed not by her but by the unreality he accepted. He did nothing wrong. He simply stopped playing the part convincingly. Jung's solution? Individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole, integrated, and sovereign within oneself. Few men ever begin this journey. They've been conditioned to seek validation, to outsource worth, to let others, especially women, define their identity. As long as they do, they remain actors on someone else's stage, easily replaced when the applause fades. Individuation demands sacrifice. It requires a man to face what he has buried, the weak, the broken, the fearful within. It asks him to stop blaming women for not seeing him and start seeing himself. Because Jung understood this, manhood is not granted through affection. It is earned through solitude, responsibility, and awareness. The man who has walked through his own unconscious cannot be seduced by projections. He becomes immune to the illusion. He ceases to be a puppet in another's play. Jung observed that modern men often trade authenticity for approval. They shape themselves into whatever will be accepted, calling it compromise, partnership, even love. But to Jung, it was self-betrayal. The man who refuses to develop his psyche becomes a slave to the projections of women, molded like wet clay into forms demanded by those who don't even know what they want. In time, he forgets who he was, and women, consciously or not, sense this. What he thinks will endear him, obedience, availability, predictability, becomes the very reason she loses interest. Why? Because the feminine, Jung taught, is not drawn to comfort, but to mystery, to a man who cannot be entirely tamed. When a man surrenders his edges, his boundaries, his spine, He doesn't become more lovable. He becomes forgettable. Here lies the paradox that traps countless men. They fear solitude more than they fear self-deception. They'd rather be a lie in someone's fantasy than risk standing alone. But Jung insisted that until a man embraces solitude, he remains imprisoned. He wrote that individuation requires a symbolic death, the death of all false selves, all illusions of worth. It's a lonely path, terrifying, because once you awaken, you cannot unsee. You notice the masks others wear, the games they play. Try to share what you see, and they'll mock you, reject you, not because you're wrong, but because you've become a mirror, and people hate mirrors that reflect what they're avoiding. Women, Jung warned, are often raised in cultures that encourage spiritual bypassing. They are praised for emotionality and intuition, told they are already whole. But Jung did not buy this. He saw the unconscious animus as a danger, a voice inside a woman speaking with false moral clarity and authority. If unexamined, this animus turns every man into a target of projection, blamed for the battles she refuses to fight within herself. She doesn't love the man. She loves the myth she made. And when he can no longer sustain the fantasy, she turns on him, not for his flaws, but for failing to embody what she never told him he was supposed to be. Projection, Jung taught, is theft. It steals reality and replaces it with illusion. Until both men and women wake from this trance, they remain locked in tragic cycles, each blaming the other, neither seeing the shadow they are dancing with. The man who refuses to see his inner feminine is doomed to become a slave to hers. He's not a victim. He's a volunteer. He accepted the role, played the part, because facing his own emptiness was more terrifying than performing in someone else's story, and most will never leave that stage. Because individuation is not a self-help mantra. It is silence, stillness, confrontation. It is sitting in the dark until the voices of self-hatred and inadequacy finally go silent. That voice, the one that says you are nothing without her, will fight you. It will whisper that no man can survive without being needed. But Jung's work said otherwise. The man who no longer seeks validation becomes free, free of illusions, free of manipulation, free of roles. In that freedom, a strange thing happens. He no longer attracts women who want fantasy. He attracts women who want truth. And truth, Jung taught, is the rarest and most dangerous form of love. It asks for nothing. It demands everything it doesn't need. It chooses. Few will reach this point. Most men will choose comfort over truth, performance over pain, fantasy over freedom. But for those who continue, who strip away every false mask, something extraordinary awaits. When he finally stands as himself, women no longer define him. They no longer complete him. They walk beside him, not as idols, not as saviors, but as fellow travelers. Jung didn't leave instructions. He left a warning, a challenge. He warned that men who fail to face themselves become puppets to projections, especially female ones. But those who dare walk the path of individuation become authors of their lives, and that is the only kind of man who cannot be replaced.